Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Rapid City Legal and Finance Committee meeting for Wednesday, April 13th. I'd like to start the meeting with a roll call and determination of quorum. Please, Maggie. Here. Thank you. Now's the time to adopt the agenda. If there's anything that the seated committee members need to modify or delete or remove, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt today's agenda as presented. So moved. Got a motion by Laurenti to adopt today's agenda, second by Nordstrom. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The agenda has been adopted. Now's the time for general public comment. This is a time for any member in the audience to address the seated committee members today on any item that is currently not on today's agenda. I do not have any speaker request forms for general public comment. Am I missing anyone in the audience? Seeing none, we're going to move on to public comment for consent items. Today's consent items are items 1 through 10 on the agenda. I currently have no speaker request forms for consent items. Am I missing anyone from the audience? Seeing no one, public comment is now closed. The committee will now consider the consent items 1 through 10. Are there any items that a committee member would like to review separately? If not, move to approve. I've got a motion by Lewis to approve consent items 1 through 10, second by Nordstrom. Any further discussion on any consent items? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Consent items have been approved. We're now moving on to public comment for non-consent items. Non-consent items on today's agenda are 11 through 14. I do have one speaker request form, but Mr. Weifenbach, would you like to address the podium at the time that we address this item? Yes, okay. So I currently have no speaker request forms for public comment, and do you have an item on today's agenda?
Yes.
Oh, would you speak at the time of your item?
Sure.
All right. So I currently have no speaker request forms for public comment. Am I missing anyone from the audience? Seeing none, public comment is now closed on non-consent items. We're moving on to item number 11. Item number 11 is Mr. Phil Jensen, and it's the dispute of a tree removal bill. And Mr. Jensen, if you could approach the podium and state your name and your affiliation with the city, and you may address the committee members.
3 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Phil Jensen. I have a property at 719 12th Street, and we had a request to cut down a tree that was deemed dead and or dangerous, and we're given a deadline to do so. And a few days before the deadline, we were able to rent a cherry picker and made quite an effort to cut down diseased parts of that tree. It did exhibit quite a bit of greenery in the top area of the tree off to the south, and we ended up leaving it. It did provide shade for the tenants in this fourplex. In any case, we got a bill for $1,292 on 3/7/16. I'm sorry? Oh. Anyway, so what we're doing, we're contesting that whether we owe that or not. And there's a couple things that come into play here. Number one, the notice that we received from the City Code Enforcement Division said, please remove dead tree in backyard. Well, what happens is we ended up with missing 2 trees. There was a tree that still had life that was in the alley toward the back of the property, and there was not a card sent for the removal of it. And so we're asking that the fee for the cutting down the trees be reduced by half, if not eliminated. Was it an error on the part of code enforcement, or was it an error on the part of the tree service company? I don't know. And we had made a very good faith effort to trim the dead out of the main tree, and it was budding out. You look at closer examination of the pictures, if you have a screen that you can actually zoom in on, you can see that there's green up against the blue sky. But that's basically it. I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. So if any of the seated committee members have any questions for staff or Mr. Jensen at this time, the chair would like to recognize Alderman Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Barbier, do you have the details on this particular item? I guess that'd be my first question.
I've got some of the rough details for you, Alderman Laurenti, but Jessica Rogers is also here from the City Attorney's Office. She's been working with Mr. Jensen, I believe, but our notice was sent on September 30th of 2015. The notice expired November 2nd of 2015, and the tree wasn't removed, or the two trees were removed February 25th of 2016. Andy Bernard, our city's arborist that works in Parks and Recreation, did acknowledge that the trees were dead and needed to be removed.
And does that include the notice was for one tree, correct? And then, and my question to you on that is, obviously it was deemed that this second tree was an issue or a code violation. Is that correct?
I believe that's the situation, but I'd like to say maybe Jess would have the details a little bit better than I do.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jess Rogers, City Attorney's Office. Yeah, what happens with these code enforcement notices a lot of the time is they'll send out a notice for something like debris, and the notice really is, this is the ordinance that you're in violation of, this is your deadline to come into compliance with the above ordinance, and this is what we'll do if you don't, which is abatement. And so the way we do it is then when we go out to abate, any violations of that ordinance that they were given notice of are abated, so we don't have to go back again. So that's what happened here. You got a notice saying you are in violation of our tree ordinance, and the please remove dead tree, that's under additional comments. That's just sort of a, this is completely dead, we need it removed. But then when they go out, if there are other dead trees, they'll remove because they're already there.
So it's a standard for code enforcement to go out on these calls and find other things that are of the same type of code violation and take care of those issues while they're there.
Exactly. If you think, a lot of what code enforcement does is things like debris, and a lot of times the exact debris in the yard will vary, but they're just telling you this is the ordinance that you were in violation of. You have to come into complete compliance by this date.
Do you often have, one more question, and maybe Jeff, you could join in on this, but when you have a situation where, I should say, citizens, do they often call in getting clarification as to what they need to do or not? Is that common?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are sort of two groups of people I think code enforcement deals with, people who call in and want lots of clarification, and code enforcement will go out and inspect if they think we might be in compliance, can you come check? Absolutely they do that. Lots of people want more time. He gets calls all the time that say, we know this tree is dead, we can't afford it right now, can we wait till we get our tax return? And we work with people, but then there are a lot of people who just don't respond, so that's kind of a norm too.
So in this particular case, was any of that afforded to the citizen? Did the citizen call not get answers? Is there any that transpired with this particular item?
There was no response until Mr. Jensen received the bill. That was the first time we heard from him.
All right, thank you very much.
I currently have no motion on the floor. If there's any other questions by seated committee members at this time, if not, I'll entertain a motion. Chair will recognize Alderman Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move to uphold the staff's recommendation.
I've got a motion to uphold staff's recommendation, code enforcement's recommendation, and a second by Alderman Laurenti. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Jensen, this is a recommending body to this full City Council meeting Monday night. This item is going to City Council Monday night with the recommendation to uphold staff's direction and code enforcement billing on this. But the full council will be hearing this Monday night.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Item number 12 is Mr. Weifenbach, who would like to bring to this committee's attention a discussion on the note for the soccer fields. And Mr. Weifenbach, if you'll state your name and your affiliation to the city, and you can address the committee members.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ron Weifenbach, 4153 Augusta Drive, Alderman, Ward 1. And I first want to be clear that the soccer people did not ask me to come forward with anything involving this whatsoever. I had been involved in this since the conception, and there was a period of time of dispute of where this soccer field should be located. And I think at the time, the people that were in charge of that soccer association were at odds with the facts that I was presenting, and things went on, and there had been several conversations about raising money for assets that were to be put towards the soccer field that didn't materialize. And I left the council, and this project had been approved and had been vetted through the whole process by the Citizens Task Force, by several councils. And the vetting of the land where the soccer field now lays was questionable at best, and it has put the new group of soccer people in a quite the precarious situation. And I think one of the reasons that they didn't come back and ask me for my participation when they started getting a shortfall was they felt that I just gave up on the project, and that isn't the case. Once the council had made a decision to move that soccer field, and that was going to be the location, that's it. Decisions were made. I agree with them, and that's all you can do. To try to go back and open up a Pandora's box or a can of worms wasn't any intention. The new group of soccer people, there's been a lot of transformation. The group from Denver's taken over. The soccer has now become at a level that I think is equivalent to girls ASA softball. And I think we can go back and look at what we've done for them over the years and look at this new soccer association and go, this is exactly the model that we would like to have. And I think that's the road they're on. And when they had the shortfall, I think they felt a little bit hat in hand to come back and say, you know what, we have a $500,000 shortfall or whatever that number was to light the fields. And so they agreed to a note. Okay. And that brings us down to what I'm asking the council and this recommending body to do is forgive the note that's been put in place. By the time it got around to me, I was too late in the process for me to make any changes, and I didn't want to hold up any of the approval process of having the expenditure and getting the lights and getting them put in. So the expenditure's been made, so we're not asking for, or I'm not asking the council to go into the future vision funds or anything like that. What I'm asking them to do is the note that is written today is to forgive that note so the future fundraising and the future kids and parents of that soccer field, which I think they've got $2 million of their own assets into that field, and another $4 million from the city, I believe, is just to forgive that note so there won't be that future revenue from the $500,000 coming back to a Vision Fund 5-year project that's already been approved. So I'll be here for questions, and I would hope that we could approve it today and move it on to the council, and I hope I gave enough history of, I've been on this project for a while, and I felt compelled to weigh in after it got to this point. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, Mr. Weifenbach. If you'll hold, there may be questions from the seated committee members. The chair would like to recognize Alderman Lewis.
I'll make a motion to approve the forgiveness of the note as per Mr. Weifenbach's request.
I've got a motion by Lewis to forgive the loan by the soccer fields of the amount is what? 550. Chair would like to have address the question to the finance officer for the amount that is being requested to be waived.
The principal amount would be $550,000.
Do I have still on the floor?
So I have a motion by Lewis to forgive the note for the soccer fields of $550,000 that was approved by the city council before, a second by Laurenti. Alderman Lewis, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just appreciate Alderman Weifenbach bringing this forward. I think it's pretty unprecedented amount of money they raised as a group. I think it should be rewarded, and it's, I don't know, just if you go out to the fields and you see what they've done out there, it's pretty amazing, and it's going to have a huge economic impact in Rapid City going forward and positive impact for the community in general. So I just appreciate you bringing that forward, sir. Thanks.
Chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Drew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to support this as well, but I have a couple questions for Alderman Weifenbach. You mentioned a group from Denver that's taking over the complex now. What does
Well,
that mean?
basically, the Soccer Association, what they've done is they've affiliated themselves with a professional team in Denver, in Colorado. I can't really answer that question directly, but I think Mr. Lewis may be able to. And what it's done is taken the training programs and everything they've done to a newer level. And it's really not like Denver doesn't dictate what they do. It's like an affiliation, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
Like an
Alderwoman
affiliation.
Drew, would you like to redirect your question to Alderman Lewis?
I would, thank you.
Alderman Lewis?
Basically what they did is they merged the two existing Rapid City Soccer, youth soccer, and Rushmore Soccer merged into one big entity, and they became under the umbrella of the Colorado Rapids Youth Development Program. So they're one of three of those in the entire country, one being in Charlotte, North Carolina, and one of the ones in Albuquerque, New Mexico, I believe. So they're actually filtering up towards the Colorado Rapids Professional Association, so it's actually a huge deal, and it makes them a lot more professional, a lot more organized, and a lot more opportunities for the children to grow as they get older.
Cool. Well, I also am impressed with the amount of money the group raised. If I do have any concerns in the future, I guess we'll just have to address them as they come up, but I would like to see some kind of a plan as to how the association wants to operate financially going forward. So that would be my only concern. But otherwise, I'm going to vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Chair would like to recognize Alderman Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Weifenbach, we appreciate you bringing forward this recommendation and wanting to forgive the note on it. However, I've got some concerns on this, and what I would like to see is how this is going to be worked out initially and through the payback process and how that the forgiven process and how that's going to be handled. And so just to be frank with you is that I'm concerned about what's going to be taking place over the Civic Center. That's on our list, and that's on our radar to be acknowledged. And then another one that's not directly associated with this, but I've got citizens in my ward that are asking for help on different items, and I can't do that right now. And the Vision Fund would be a good resource for doing that. And so if we start coming up short in the Vision Funds, I'm not prepared to say no to those people either. I'd like to help them out as well. So at this time, I'm going to defer my vote. I will not defer my vote, but I'm going to have to defer the question because I'm going to wind up right now saying no to this project because of other things that I see as greater needs. So, still like soccer, still appreciate soccer and what the kids are doing and what the association and the groups are doing and what they're trying to do. But right now, I'm not ready to support it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, is there a question in that?
There is not, but if you'll still hold, there may be other questions yet. I don't think the discussion's over yet. Seeing no further lights, I would like to direct a question to the finance officer. Pauline, can you please explain to us what the council approved as far as setting up this loan, what the funding source was, and how the loan was supposed to, what were the original dollars, what five-year plan were those original dollars out of, and what the anticipation was for the repayment of this loan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The original loan amount was $800,000, $250,000 for signage and $550,000 for the lights. It was a 5-year loan with semi-annual payments at 3% interest. And can you ask the rest of your question again?
Yes.
Sorry.
So when the council approved this $800,000 loan, $250,000 for signage and then $550,000 for lights, what was the funding source of the full $800,000?
That was undesignated cash.
Out of just the general fund?
That was out of the Vision Fund in 2015
All right. So it was undesignated cash out of the existing 5-year vision plan project, or the plan.
Correct, the fourth round of projects.
So out of that undesignated cash, this money was loaned out. It has no bearing or no effect on the 1.362 million that the mayor has requested from that same vision fund for the ADA Civic Center improvements, and all other projects still are whole with their original amounts, and this $800,000 was truly free and clear,
Yes, it was.
and is today.
It is. I will tell you, basically, this ends up being $120,000 rounding a year that we would not see coming back to the Vision Fund for 5 years.
So by forgiving this, with the recommendation going to City Council to forgive this loan of $550,000, it just reduces the undesignated cash, and no of the other projects that are currently in that 5-year plan are jeopardized or being short from the existing monies within the Vision Fund.
That's
covered-
correct.
That covered from 2011 through 2015.
Correct.
Okay, so it does sound like it was free and clear, undesignated cash. So Alderman Nordstrom, I don't know if that helps answer your question at this time. Does anybody else, excuse me, does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Weifenbach or the finance officer? Mr. Weifenbach, thank you for bringing this to our attention, and
Thank you,
Pauline-
Madam Chair, and I thank you.
And Pauline, thank you for clearing that up, because that's not the way I understood it, and I was, along with Alderman Nordstrom, prepared to vote no today, but knowing that it's undesignated cash, I can support this.
It's on the record that you're admitting you were wrong?
I didn't say I was wrong, exactly. The chief financial officer, heard that. I just simply said I needed more information, Alderman
I didn't
Lewis,
expect
so.
an admission, thank you.
So I am not admitting I was wrong, just for the record. We'll take a vote now. All in favor of forgiving the note of $550,000 for the soccer fields? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Recommendation will go to Monday night full council. Thank you, Mr. Weifenbach. Item number 13 is the introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6103 to amend certain provisions concerning digital signs, sign credits, and spacing of off-premise signs by amending section 17.50.080 and 17.50.090 of the Rapid City Municipal Code.
Move to approve.
I've got a motion by Laurenti to approve, second by Drew. Chair would like to recognize Alderman Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just the 3 items that I feel it's very important so that the public understand what's taking place. It's primarily to repeal the ban on digital LED off-premise signs, and that requires a change within the current ordinance and in 2 different places, and that's item 1. Item 2 is the spacing provision still allows the Rapid City to be the most stringent within South Dakota, reducing it down to 1,000 feet for minimum linear distance. And item 3 is to acknowledge that there is a sunset provision for the sign credits. Basically, the way I'm reading this is that if we didn't allow for a sunset, in my mind, it would be they would go on into perpetuity for the sign credits. And so there has to be something to address the use of those sign credits. And those are the 3 main areas that need to be addressed in this ordinance change. And and I'll yield the floor.
Thank you. Based on what Alderman Nordstrom just summarized, is there any other discussion from council members? If not, yes, we do have a motion on the floor to approve. If not, I would like to address a question to the City Attorney Joel Ledeen. Joel, I have a misconception, or I would like clarification on Alderman Nordstrom's last point on the sign credits. It's the way he said it is not the way I read it.
Correct. The initiated ordinance imposed a sunset clause on the any sign credits that were issued that said they would now expire within 20 years. So the issue was, prior to the adoption of the initiated ordinance, there were many sign credits that had been issued. The issue is whether or not the sunset provision applied to the credits that were issued before the sunset provision was enacted. This simply acknowledges the law, which is that you cannot apply it retroactively to credits which had been issued. So it just clarifies that it does not apply to the credits that were issued before the enactment. But there would be still a sunset clause on any new credits that are issued.
Thank you, Joel. And Alderman Nordstrom, you're saying, yes, that's the way you understood it? Yep. Absolutely. All right. Any further questions? We do have a motion to approve. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 14 is a second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6111 to change the terms and powers of the Rapid City Regional Airport Board by amending sections 2.72.030 and 2.72.070 of the Rapid City Code, and the chair would like to recognize City Attorney Wade Nyberg.
I handed out a revised version of this, so I would ask you to approve the ordinance as amended. After a couple of questions from last committee meeting and staff taking a second look at this, we're going to tweak the language a little bit to clarify that it's only what's required by state law that needs to come to the council, not every policy or regulation, just the charges for use of the airport and regulations for users of the airport.
And this change is the change that's been outlined in red and blue on the last portion of this, correct?
That's correct, the very last paragraph.
Are there any other questions from seated committee members? Move to approve. Second. Got a motion by Lewis to approve, second by Laurenti. Any further discussion? Thank you, Mr. Nyberg. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. I've got a motion by Lewis to adjourn, second by Nordstrom. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.